Long before modern borders and contemporary histories took shape, there existed a civilization so advanced, so meticulous in its design and foresight, that traces of it have only recently begun to surface, scattered across remote regions of the earth. Legends spoke of cities that shimmered with knowledge, temples aligned to the stars, and a people whose intellect, spirituality, and artistry were unmatched in their time. Yet, despite the grandeur suggested by these whispers, history has largely forgotten them. Scholars debated, explorers speculated, and myths evolved, but the civilization's true nature remained hidden, leaving behind a tantalizing riddle. How could a society so remarkable simply vanish? From the earliest expeditions into the civilization's supposed heartlands, researchers were met with paradoxes. Archaeological evidence hinted at sophisticated urban planning, complex social hierarchies, and technological innovation far ahead of contemporary societies. Yet there were no clear records in neighboring civilizations' chronicles. Pottery, tools, inscriptions, and ruins indicated mastery over both practical and intellectual domains, suggesting that these people had developed an integrated system of knowledge encompassing science, spirituality, governance, and art. Yet, despite this mastery, they disappeared from the historical narrative. Their absence posed a question that has haunted scholars and explorers alike. Was their vanishing natural, catastrophic, deliberate, or hidden? The earliest explorers noted that many of the ruins were situated in locations of both strategic and spiritual significance. Valleys protected by mountain ranges, rivers providing sustenance and trade routes, and vistas aligned with the sunrise or specific celestial events indicated a civilization deeply attuned to its environment. Temples, palaces, and observatories were constructed with precision that suggested not only architectural skill, but profound mathematical and astronomical knowledge. Stonework revealed expertise in engineering. Some walls remained standing for centuries without mortar, resistant to earthquakes and weather, while certain chambers were deliberately designed to preserve light, shadow, and celestial alignments. Every structure seemed intentional, a statement of permanence and foresight. Yet the civilization's disappearance was equally deliberate in appearance. Cities and settlements showed no evidence of haphazard destruction or abandonment typical of invasions, famines, or natural disasters. Instead, some sites appeared intentionally hidden or concealed, overgrown and protected by natural barriers. Certain ceremonial structures were shrouded behind forests or cliffs, suggesting that the people had anticipated the passage of centuries, creating spaces meant to survive but remain undiscovered by those unprepared to interpret their significance. This combination of technological mastery and intentional concealment painted a picture of a society both brilliant and cautious, aware of the fragility of knowledge and determined to preserve it beyond their own lifetimes. Legends associated with this civilization only deepened the mystery. Oral histories, fragments of scrolls, and later interpretations by neighboring cultures described a society whose wisdom surpassed that of its contemporaries. Some stories spoke of scholars capable of predicting celestial events with uncanny accuracy. Others described leaders who governed with a blend of moral insight and strategic intelligence. Still others hinted at technological marvels that predated known history. While skeptics dismissed many of these accounts as myth or exaggeration, the convergence of material evidence with legends suggested that the civilization had indeed achieved feats extraordinary for its time, and that much of what had been lost may have been deliberately encoded to resist casual discovery. Artifacts recovered from the earliest excavations provided a window into the civilization's intellectual and cultural life. Pottery and tools revealed meticulous craftsmanship. Ceremonial objects suggested ritualized practices linking the natural and spiritual worlds. Inscriptions combined symbolic, mathematical, and linguistic elements, hinting at systems of communication and record-keeping that transcended simple storytelling. Even seemingly mundane items, when studied in context, revealed layers of meaning. Measurements and ratios indicated a sophisticated understanding of geometry and physics, while decorative motifs encoded astronomical and philosophical principles. Each artifact became a puzzle, a fragment of a broader intellectual tapestry that the civilization had woven with intent and foresight. Explorers quickly noticed that the civilization's approach to space and architecture suggested a worldview that merged the earthly and the cosmic. Temples aligned to solstices, altars oriented toward prominent star systems, and roadways tracing the paths of rivers or mountain ridges all implied a people who understood the interconnectedness of their environment, society, and the universe. Urban planning reflected both functionality and symbolic resonance. Marketplaces, governance buildings, and residential areas were organized to facilitate social cohesion while also reinforcing philosophical principles, suggesting a culture in which moral, spiritual, and practical dimensions were inseparable. The civilization's built environment functioned as both living space and educational canvas, teaching and inspiring all who inhabited it. Despite these revelations, the question of disappearance persisted. Why had such a society, capable of preserving knowledge across generations and centuries, left so few traces in contemporary history? Some hypotheses suggested environmental shifts, droughts, climate changes, or geological events that forced migration or abandonment. Others pointed to social collapse, conflicts, or internal restructuring. Yet the lack of evidence for violent destruction, combined with deliberate concealment in architecture and artifacts, led many explorers to a more tantalizing theory that the civilization had intentionally withdrawn from the world stage, leaving behind encoded knowledge to endure beyond the reach of conquest, neglect, or misunderstanding. Their disappearance may have been strategic, a conscious act of preservation rather than a mere consequence of misfortune. As expeditions progressed, patterns began to emerge, linking the civilization's architecture, artifacts, and inscriptions into a coherent system. Sacred sites, hidden chambers, astronomical alignments, and encoded maps suggested that the people had designed an enduring curriculum, a method for teaching and preserving knowledge that could survive centuries of obscurity. Every temple, stone carving, and ceremonial artifact was not only a product of skill, but a deliberate message, a test of intellect and insight for those who would come later. The civilization had created a legacy that was meant to challenge, guide, and ultimately reward careful and thoughtful exploration. The explorers soon realized that the vanished civilization story was not merely one of lost cities or forgotten technologies. It was a story of foresight, intentionality, and preservation. It was a civilization that had mastered both knowledge and concealment, leaving a trail of wisdom that could be uncovered by those persistent, observant, and willing to engage fully with its mysteries. Every discovery reinforced the sense of entering a dialogue across centuries, a conversation with a society that had vanished from history yet remained alive through its ingenuity, planning, and encoded legacy. Long before explorers set sail with maps in hand, before scholars meticulously documented history, there were stories whispered around fires, passed from generation to generation, surviving centuries of war, conquest, and decay. These were not simple tales of kings and battles, nor were they merely moral lessons. They were fragments of memory, echoes of civilization that, somehow, refused to vanish entirely, even as the sands of time threatened to bury it forever. Across distant continents, strikingly similar legends emerged, speaking of advanced cities, strange technologies, and people who seemed to possess knowledge that defied the ages. The patterns are uncanny, the coincidences too consistent to dismiss. These stories, persistent and often overlooked, form the first tangible threads connecting us to a civilization erased from the pages of mainstream history. In Mesopotamia, one of the earliest cradles of civilization, scribes wrote of a people whose knowledge surpassed even the most sophisticated temples of their time. They spoke of towers that touched the heavens, of tools that seemed to manipulate nature itself, and of a wisdom that could alter the course of human destiny. These texts, cryptic and fragmented, describe events that cannot be fully understood in isolation. They hint at a broader network, a civilization whose reach may have extended far beyond the Fertile Crescent. Scholars who attempt to decode these ancient scripts often hit a wall, encountering symbols and ideas that seem almost alien in their sophistication. Yet, hidden in these fragments, there is a clear message. A civilization once existed that blurred the line between legend and reality. Halfway across the world, in the Americas, indigenous legends speak of golden cities hidden in mist-covered mountains and sacred knowledge kept by guardians of the land. The Incas and Maya, often credited with brilliance in astronomy and engineering, hint in their myths at a precursor civilization, a society whose advanced understanding of the stars and mathematics was passed down, sometimes intentionally, through oral tradition. Similarly, the Aboriginal Dreamtime stories of Australia contain curious references to vanished peoples and extraordinary structures, suggesting that the memory of this lost civilization stretched across oceans and continents. Could these similarities be coincidence? Or is there something far more compelling at work? A hidden history connecting cultures that mainstream scholarship refuses to acknowledge? Even in Europe, obscure chronicles and folk tales whisper of cities that existed before recorded history. Medieval texts speak of great civilizations wiped away by cataclysmic events, leaving only ruins and strange artifacts behind. Travelers' tales, often dismissed as fantasy or exaggeration, describe temples and libraries with knowledge far surpassing the intellectual capacities of the known world at the time. Here, legend and history intersect in the most unsettling ways. Artifacts appear out of place. Structures predate the civilizations known to have built them, and yet the stories persist like faint signals across centuries, calling the curious to investigate further. The persistence of these legends is no accident. Myths have a way of surviving where historical records fail, often because they are encoded with warnings, wisdom, or memory that society subconsciously preserves. They carry subtle hints, a reference to a technological marvel, a description of an astronomical alignment, or a warning of great destruction. Taken alone, anyone's story might seem fanciful. But when viewed collectively across continents and cultures, the pattern becomes undeniable. A civilization once existed that has left indelible marks on human consciousness, even if its physical traces were systematically destroyed or buried. And yet, the legends are maddeningly elusive. Names are forgotten, locations obscured, and the very people who recount the tales often admit to hearing them second or third hand. Travelers in the 16th and 17th centuries wrote of mountains that moved, rivers that vanished, and cities that disappeared overnight, only to be dismissed by authorities as exaggerations or hallucinations. The more the stories are questioned, the more their mystery deepens. Perhaps this is the civilization's most enduring trick, to exist in a space between belief and skepticism, forever tantalizing those who dare to seek it. The implications of these persistent legends are profound. They suggest that mainstream history is incomplete, that knowledge has been lost or deliberately hidden, and that the world we think we know is only a fraction of what once existed. The lost civilization is not just a relic of the past. It is a shadow that stretches across time, leaving subtle fingerprints in myths, structures, and the collective memory of humanity. The whispers demand attention, challenging the notion that our understanding of history is absolute, and offering instead the thrilling possibility that there is a hidden truth waiting to be uncovered. This is the stage upon which the hidden expedition will step. The explorers who, armed with maps, instruments, and insatiable curiosity, dared to follow the legends rather than dismiss them. They would cross treacherous lands, face skepticism, and encounter mysteries that no one before had documented. Their journey is more than a tale of discovery. It is a confrontation with the very fabric of history, a test of what is believed possible, and a pursuit of knowledge that some would rather keep buried. The legends, persistent and defiant, become not just background, but the compass guiding their path, a signal that the vanished civilization may still whisper from the shadows, waiting to be found. In following these stories, we step into a world where the line between myth and history blurs. Every fragment, every whisper, every ancient tale hints at something extraordinary just beyond reach. And as we prepare to trace the footsteps of those first daring explorers, we come to understand that the legends are not merely stories. They're breadcrumbs leading to a truth that, once revealed, could forever alter our understanding of human history. Maps are supposed to guide us through the world, to turn the unknown into the known, to bring order to chaos. Yet, some maps defy expectation, hinting at lands that should not exist, coastlines that vanish into the impossible, and cities whose existence is denied by both time and scholarship. These are not ordinary navigational tools. They are enigmas, coated with knowledge that seems almost too precise to have survived centuries of neglect. For centuries, these strange documents have teased the curious, whispered secrets to those willing to look beyond the obvious, and marked the paths of explorers who dared to seek what others dismissed as fiction. Among them lay the trail that would lead to the lost civilization, a path obscured not by distance, but by deliberate secrecy and forgotten understanding. Long before the famous expedition set sail, cartographers had been recording anomalies that challenged the conventional understanding of geography. Ancient Babylonian star charts hinted at coastlines no longer present. Medieval European maps contained islands that vanished without explanation. Polynesian navigators recorded atolls and reefs that modern explorers could scarcely locate. Every strange mark, every unknown river, every city drawn in meticulous detail, yet absent from all contemporary records, raised a question. How did these mapmakers acquire their knowledge? Some theorists suggest that fragments of ancient civilizations, themselves long lost, were preserved in the maps and passed down through secretive lineages of scholars, monks, and explorers. Others hint at something more extraordinary, that the maps contained encoded messages deliberately designed to lead those worthy enough to the civilization that time had tried to erase. One of the most confounding aspects of these maps is their precision. Cartographers of the medieval and early modern periods, despite rudimentary tools, often plotted coastlines, mountain ranges, and celestial alignments with astonishing accuracy. Some maps even depict entire continents, long before their official discovery by explorers like Columbus or Magellan. Critics have dismissed these as mere coincidence or imaginative conjecture, yet the recurring patterns cannot be ignored. Rivers flow with inexplicable exactness. Mountains appear in locations that correspond to later geological surveys. Cities are marked in ways that suggest real, functioning urban centers rather than imaginary constructs. These maps are not mistakes. They are puzzles, inviting the brave and the inquisitive to decipher their hidden truths. The expedition central to our story relied heavily on one such collection of maps, passed down through generations and guarded jealously by those who understood their significance. Unlike ordinary charts, these maps contained coded symbols, annotations in forgotten languages, and alignments that hinted at astronomical and spiritual knowledge. The explorers who studied them quickly realized that following the maps would require more than navigation skills. It demanded intuition, patience, and an openness to the inexplicable. They had to read not just the geography, but the subtle patterns between stars, rivers, and mountains, interpreting each mark as part of a larger cosmic design. The map's enigma deepened when the expedition noticed correspondences with ancient texts. Inscriptions from far-off civilizations mirrored the layouts, symbols, and coordinates found in the charts. Locations mentioned in the legends now seemed to anchor themselves in reality. The lost cities hinted at in oral traditions suddenly became tangible, each map a breadcrumb leading through the wilderness of time and memory. Yet, for every revelation, there was a deeper layer of mystery. Certain areas were deliberately obscured, erased, or mislabeled. It became clear that someone, or some force, had intentionally concealed knowledge, ensuring that only those who approached with the right combination of insight and determination could uncover the truth. One of the most intriguing aspects of the maps is their subtle interplay between the visible and the hidden. At first glance, they appear as ordinary navigational charts, filled with rivers, mountains, and settlements. But a closer examination reveals anomalies, impossible distances, inconsistent coastlines, and markings that seem to defy natural law. Only those who studied them extensively could begin to decode their secrets. It is almost as if the maps were designed not just to guide, but to test, filtering the unworthy and protecting the civilization's knowledge until the right moment in history. This duality, practical tool and cryptic puzzle, would define the expedition's journey, shaping their decisions and testing their resolve at every turn. As the explorers followed the maps, they encountered locations that seemed to confirm the chart's accuracy. Hidden valleys, unusual rock formations, and structures that could not be explained by known civilizations. Each discovery reinforced the notion that the lost civilization was not mere legend, but a historical reality deliberately erased from conventional records. Yet, the maps also introduced new questions. Some symbols remained undecipherable, some paths appeared impossibly treacherous, and some locations hinted at dangers far beyond mere geography. It was clear that the civilization they sought had left not just physical remnants, but warnings and guidance, encoded in a medium that would endure across centuries. The mystery of the mapmakers is intertwined with the civilization itself. Who were these individuals capable of creating such precise, layered, and enduring records? Were they scholars, priests, or visionaries with access to forbidden knowledge? Or perhaps they were members of secretive orders, tasked with safeguarding a civilization's memory even as the physical world around it crumbled. Whatever the case, the expedition's reliance on these maps underscores a profound truth. The path to discovery is rarely straightforward, and the knowledge that survives history is often carefully curated, preserved, and hidden, waiting for those brave enough to follow. In the end, the maps serve as both guide and guardian, leading the expedition toward a vanished civilization while simultaneously challenging every assumption about history, geography, and human capability. Each line, each symbol, each hidden annotation hints at a world far richer and stranger than the textbooks admit. As the explorers journeyed into the unknown, the maps became more than tools. They became a bridge between legend and reality, past and present, known and hidden. The enigma of the mapmakers is not merely a prelude to discovery. It is a testament to the civilization's enduring intelligence and the lengths they went to preserve their secrets against the erosion of time and the suppression of history. The expedition had only just begun, yet already it was clear that the journey mapped out for them was unlike any other. The land they sought was not simply hidden. It had been obscured deliberately, protected by layers of myth, legend, and coded cartography. Every step forward demanded courage, intellect, and an openness to possibilities that bordered on the unbelievable. In following these ancient guides, the explorers were not just retracing paths. They were decoding the very intentions of a civilization that refused to be forgotten, a civilization whose existence could challenge everything we think we know about the past. The first indications that the vanished civilization had once thrived were subtle, almost imperceptible at first glance. Yet for those trained in observation and guided by intuition, the ruins spoke volumes. Tiny inscriptions etched into stone edges, faint geometric patterns carved into cliff faces, and remnants of what appeared to be ceremonial platforms hinted at a society with remarkable sophistication. The expedition quickly realized that these were not random traces of human activity, but deliberate markers left behind by a civilization that had mastered the art of communication across time. Each fragment demanded careful study, for it was here, in these overlooked details, that the first signs of true contact could be discerned. The earliest discoveries were often mundane in appearance: fragments of pottery, partially eroded tablets, and small artifacts strewn across abandoned plazas. Yet their craftsmanship was exceptional. Even broken vessels bore intricate designs that suggested a deep understanding of geometry and proportion. Inscribed symbols hinted at a complex language or system of record-keeping, while patterns repeated across different sites implied standardized methods of communication and construction. These findings challenged conventional archaeological assumptions, suggesting a civilization that not only mastered practical skills, but also cultivated a sophisticated intellectual culture. It became clear that what seemed accidental was, in fact, intentional. The civilization had left behind a network of signals, meant to guide and educate future seekers. One of the earliest breakthroughs came when explorers identified what appeared to be alignment markers: stones, pillars, and terraces positioned according to astronomical phenomena. Shadows cast at specific times revealed inscriptions previously invisible, while certain carvings corresponded to solstices, equinoxes, and celestial events. The civilization had encoded astronomical knowledge directly into the landscape, creating a silent dialogue between Earth and sky. These markers served as both practical guides and philosophical statements, reflecting an understanding of the universe that was both empirical and symbolic. The first signs of contact, therefore, were not just material. They were intellectual and spiritual, bridging the gap between past and present in subtle but profound ways. Artifacts recovered from these early sites provided additional evidence of deliberate communication. Ceremonial implements, small mechanical devices, and objects of unknown function suggested a culture that valued precision, observation, and intellectual engagement. Some tools appeared functional, yet contained hidden components, while decorative elements carried repeated symbolic motifs that mirrored inscriptions on nearby ruins. It became increasingly apparent that the civilization had designed these objects to convey layered meanings, practical instructions intertwined with philosophical or spiritual teachings. The first contact was not only tactile but cognitive, inviting observers to think, interpret, and participate in a long-forgotten system of knowledge. Explorers soon noticed a recurring pattern. Sites were connected by more than geography. They were linked conceptually. Temples, plazas, and ceremonial platforms shared symbolic motifs, architectural proportions, and alignments with one another, suggesting a civilization that viewed space and knowledge as interconnected. Moving from one site to the next was akin to following a carefully laid narrative, each location offering a piece of a larger puzzle. For those who observed closely, the first signs of contact revealed a civilization that had not only mastered construction and engineering, but had also developed a sophisticated system of encoding and transmitting information across generations. The symbolic dimension of the ruins became increasingly apparent as researchers began to decode repeated motifs and inscriptions. Geometric patterns, depictions of celestial bodies, and abstract symbols were interwoven with narrative sequences, creating a multi-layered system of communication. Some inscriptions suggested philosophical concepts, principles of balance, justice, and harmony, while others hinted at technological knowledge, astronomical calculations, or ritual practices. The civilization had anticipated that future explorers would need both patience and intelligence to decipher these messages, embedding layers of meaning in ways that were simultaneously challenging and instructive. The first signs of contact, therefore, were intellectual invitations, subtle yet deliberate in their complexity. As the expedition advanced, they encountered evidence of ritualized communication. Certain platforms and altars were positioned to interact with natural phenomena. Sunlight, moonlight, and shadow played across inscriptions to reveal hidden details at specific times of day or year. Some chambers included reflective surfaces, carved basins, or metallic elements designed to capture sound or light in precise ways, enhancing understanding or signaling alignment. These features suggested a civilization acutely aware of perception and cognition, using environmental factors to reinforce lessons or convey information. Contact, in this sense, was experiential. The landscape itself became a medium through which knowledge was transmitted, blending observation, interpretation, and engagement. The first signs of contact were also relational, connecting the explorers to the civilization's worldview. Inscriptions and carvings emphasize the interconnectedness of humans, nature, and the cosmos, suggesting a culture that valued observation, ethics, and balance. Celestial alignments were not merely practical. They conveyed cosmological principles, linking human activity to the broader universe. Artifacts were not simply tools. They were moral and intellectual instruments, designed to cultivate insight and reflection. Each encounter with the ruins reinforced the sense that the civilization had anticipated centuries of interpretation, creating a legacy that demanded active engagement rather than passive observation. Some of the most compelling evidence of deliberate communication came from hidden or partially concealed chambers. Accessing these spaces required observation, intuition, and sometimes mechanical skill. False doors, narrow passages, and intricate locks ensured that only persistent and capable explorers could enter. Within these chambers, inscriptions and artifacts were preserved with exceptional care, often integrated with celestial markers or symbolic arrangements. The civilization had created a system in which discovery itself was a form of learning, ensuring that knowledge was not merely obtained but earned through careful study, patience, and discernment. Even at this early stage, the expedition began to sense the civilization's intent. The first signs of contact were not accidents of preservation. They were deliberate. Every artifact, inscription, and alignment suggested foresight, planning, and an understanding of how knowledge could survive centuries of neglect, decay, or human oversight. The civilization seemed to have anticipated the limitations of future explorers, embedding redundancy, symbolism, and layered meaning to ensure that the pursuit of understanding required both intellect and ethical engagement. Contact, then, was a test as much as a gift, designed to shape those who approached it with care and attention. As months of study unfolded, the expedition realized that these early signs of contact were merely the threshold. Pottery fragments hinted at social hierarchy. Architectural alignments suggested ethical and philosophical principles. Inscriptions encoded astronomical, mathematical, and spiritual knowledge. Each discovery connected to the next, forming a continuum of learning and interpretation. The first signs of contact, subtle though they were, opened a doorway to a civilization whose mastery of intellect, art, and spirit had been deliberately preserved across centuries, waiting for observers willing to engage fully with its complexity. By the conclusion of this phase of exploration, the expedition understood that they had crossed a threshold. The vanished civilization was no longer a distant legend or a vague hypothesis. It was present, communicated through stone, metal, and earth, revealing itself slowly, methodically, and with intention. The first signs of contact had succeeded in their purpose: to awaken curiosity, challenge perception, and invite engagement with a civilization that had mastered the art of enduring legacy. For the explorers, it was a moment of profound realization. They were no longer mere observers of history. They had become participants in a dialogue spanning centuries, a connection to minds long vanished, but meticulously preserved in the very fabric of the world around them. Beyond the maps, beyond the whispered legends, lay the real challenge: crossing into the unknown. For the expedition, this phase of the journey was no mere matter of navigation or endurance. It was a descent into territory that defied expectation, a confrontation with landscapes and dangers that had remained untouched for centuries. As the explorers left behind familiar landmarks, their surroundings shifted into a world both breathtaking and perilous, a realm where nature itself seemed to guard the secrets of a vanished civilization. Every step forward carried a sense of awe, but also a deepening tension, a feeling that they were being drawn into a story older than memory itself. The terrain they encountered was as varied as it was treacherous. Dense forests stretched like walls, concealing rivers that shifted unpredictably, and mountains rose like jagged sentinels, their peaks disappearing into the mist. Hidden valleys appeared unexpectedly, their floors dotted with stones etched with strange symbols, as if signaling to those who could read their meaning. The expedition faced challenges that could not have been predicted by any map: landslides, sudden storms, and rivers swollen beyond recognition. Each obstacle tested their resolve and skills, and yet, with every difficulty came a sense that they were approaching something monumental, a civilization whose existence had been deliberately erased from history. Local knowledge offered little comfort. The few inhabitants they encountered spoke in hushed tones, warning of lands where men vanish and rivers forget their path. Some described strange lights at night, ruins swallowed by the jungle, and echoes of ceremonies long abandoned. To outsiders, these accounts might seem the ramblings of superstition, yet the explorers sensed a kernel of truth hidden within the fear. They began to realize that they were not only facing natural hazards, but also the lingering presence of a civilization whose traces had been concealed for reasons that were only slowly becoming clear. As the expedition pushed deeper, the psychological toll became apparent. Isolation, exhaustion, and the unrelenting tension of navigating uncharted lands weighed heavily on the group. Nights were long and uneasy, filled with the sounds of the wilderness, distant calls of animals, the rush of hidden waterfalls, and the ever-present whisper of the wind through ancient trees. By day, the explorers faced relentless physical challenges, scaling cliffs, fording treacherous rivers, and traversing dense vegetation that seemed determined to halt their progress. Every success was hard-won, every small discovery a reward that reinforced their belief that the lost civilization awaited just beyond the next ridge or river bend. Amid these trials, the expedition began to notice patterns, anomalies in the landscape that hinted at human influence. Straight lines of unusually shaped stones, terraces carved into hillsides, and subtle alignments with celestial markers suggested that they were on the trail of a society that had mastered both engineering and the natural world. The explorers realized that the civilization they sought had not only existed, but had deliberately shaped its environment in ways that endured centuries of neglect. These discoveries fueled their determination, providing proof that the myths, the maps, and the whispered legends were not fantasy, but guides pointing toward a reality long hidden from conventional history. Tensions within the expedition occasionally flared. Some members began to doubt the path or question the authenticity of the clues, while others urged unwavering faith in the maps and legends. The isolation amplified these conflicts, but it also forged an unspoken bond among those who persisted, creating a camaraderie grounded in shared purpose and a growing sense that they were part of something larger than themselves. Every debate, every challenge, every near miss with danger became part of the story of their journey, a narrative that mirrored the struggles of the civilization they were seeking to uncover. And then there were the moments of awe that made the hardships worthwhile. Sunrise over hidden valleys revealed landscapes that seemed untouched by time. Waterfalls cascaded into emerald pools, and ancient stone structures peeked through the foliage, hinting at cities yet to be fully discovered. Small artifacts emerged, carvings, pottery shards, and mysterious objects that seemed far too advanced for the era to which they were attributed. Each of these discoveries acted as both a breadcrumb and a challenge, drawing the explorers further into the unknown while hinting at the civilization's ingenuity and foresight. The expedition began to sense a rhythm to the journey, as if the land itself guided their steps. The maps and legends had provided the initial direction, but now the explorers were attuned to subtler cues, patterns in the vegetation, anomalies in terrain, and alignments with the rising and setting of the sun. These natural markers seemed deliberate, remnants of a society deeply connected to both the earth and the cosmos. With each day, the boundary between the known and the unknown blurred further, immersing the explorers in a world where the ordinary rules of history, geography, and human expectation no longer applied. By the time the expedition neared the first major signs of the vanished civilization, a profound sense of anticipation had taken hold. Every challenge overcome, every danger faced, had prepared them for the moment when the myths would manifest into tangible reality. The journey through uncharted lands was more than a physical traversal. It was a passage through time, memory, and legend, leading the explorers toward discoveries that would challenge the very foundations of what was believed possible. Crossing into the unknown was no longer just a phrase. It was the essence of their quest, the gateway to truths deliberately hidden for centuries, and the threshold beyond which history and legend would converge. The moment the expedition uncovered the first fragments of ancient maps, a wave of anticipation and awe swept through the team. Unlike conventional maps, these artifacts were not merely practical representations of terrain. They were sophisticated, multi-layered blueprints that blended geography, philosophy, and encoded knowledge. Some fragments were carved onto stone tablets, others etched onto treated animal hides, while a few were painted on ceramic surfaces. Each map appeared to serve multiple purposes, navigating physical landscapes, revealing sacred or hidden sites, and conveying symbolic or philosophical truths that had been deliberately embedded by civilization that value knowledge as both practical and transcendent. At first glance, the maps seemed ordinary, depictions of rivers, mountains, and settlements. Yet upon closer inspection, the explorers noticed anomalies that defied conventional geography. Certain rivers curved unnaturally, mountain ranges aligned with celestial markers, and some settlements appeared in locations where no modern record existed. These irregularities suggested that the maps were not simply descriptive but prescriptive. They were guides designed to teach, test, and reveal truths to those who approached them with insight. The civilization had encoded multiple layers of meaning, ensuring that understanding required careful observation, interpretation, and reflection. The explorers soon realized that the maps functioned as both literal and symbolic tools. Roads and pathways indicated routes through challenging terrain, while hidden markings pointed towards sacred sites or concealed chambers. Geometric patterns, when traced and analyzed, revealed alignments with solstices, equinoxes, and other celestial events. Symbols embedded within the maps encoded ethical and philosophical principles, suggesting that the civilization had designed them to teach moral reasoning alongside navigation. In this way, the maps were more than tools. They were guides to a way of thinking, a deliberate system of learning that merged knowledge, ethics, and observation into a single, integrated experience. One of the most striking features of the maps was their use of abstraction. Certain areas were represented not by literal depictions, but by geometric forms or symbolic illustrations. Mountains, rivers, and temples were depicted as triangles, lines, and circles, each carrying multiple layers of meaning. At first, these abstractions were frustrating. They defied conventional interpretation and seemed almost cryptic. But as the expedition cross-referenced these symbols with ruins, celestial events, and inscriptions, the patterns began to emerge. The civilization had developed a symbolic language that allowed knowledge to be preserved in a flexible, multidimensional form, accessible only to those capable of connecting the dots across time, space, and thought. Material analysis of the maps further revealed the civilization's meticulous attention to preservation. Stone tablets were carved with tools that left no room for error, ensuring precision and durability. Animal hides were treated with natural resins and pigments, preserving colors and inscriptions for centuries. Ceramics were baked to exact temperatures, resistant to decay, and often inscribed before firing to ensure longevity. The civilization had clearly anticipated the passage of time, environmental decay, and human oversight, creating a system in which knowledge could survive both naturally and deliberately, awaiting discovery by those prepared to perceive its depth. The maps also revealed the civilization's understanding of interconnectivity. Certain symbols indicated relationships between distant sites, suggesting that settlements, temples, and hidden chambers were not isolated but part of a coherent network. Rivers, roads, and mountain passes were depicted in ways that highlighted not only physical accessibility, but also symbolic or ritual significance. By mapping relationships between locations, the civilization had created a multidimensional view of their world, one in which geography, ethics, astronomy, and societal organization were intertwined. This was a worldview that saw human activity as inseparable from the environment, the cosmos, and moral principles, a perspective that the explorers could only begin to grasp. Cross-referencing multiple maps revealed yet another layer of sophistication. When fragments from different regions were aligned, patterns emerged that suggested not only practical navigation, but encoded astronomical and philosophical knowledge. Certain alignments corresponded to constellations, solstices, or lunar cycles, while geometric sequences hinted at mathematical principles or cosmological models. The civilization had embedded knowledge that spanned disciplines, ensuring that those who studied the maps holistically would uncover insights far beyond mere cartography. Understanding required synthesis, a deliberate engagement with multiple dimensions of thought simultaneously. The maps also included hidden markers or codes, often overlooked by casual observation. Small symbols, etched in corners or along borders, served as keys to unlock further understanding. Some were numerical sequences, others abstract symbols, and a few appeared as artistic motifs that only revealed meaning when interpreted in the context of celestial alignments or architectural measurements. The civilization had anticipated that knowledge could be misused or misunderstood, embedding layers of cryptic instruction that required diligence, intuition, and ethical mindfulness to decipher. The maps were not simply navigational. They were tests, invitations, and guides all at once. The expedition's engagement with the maps demanded patience, persistence, and collaboration. Individual observations often revealed only partial insights. It was through group analysis, discussion, and cross-referencing with physical ruins that the full significance emerged. The maps acted as catalysts for teamwork, reflection, and iterative problem-solving. The civilization had created a system in which learning was dynamic, interactive, and communal, emphasizing that the pursuit of knowledge is both an intellectual and social endeavor. One of the most astonishing discoveries came when the explorers realized that certain maps contained layered perspectives. When rotated, overlaid, or aligned with celestial events, previously hidden routes, chambers, or symbolic sequences were revealed. It was as if the maps were multidimensional, capable of conveying different truths depending on the observer's skill, awareness, and timing. The civilization had created a system that was simultaneously flexible and precise, preserving knowledge in ways that could evolve with discovery while remaining resistant to superficial interpretation. The cultural and philosophical significance of the maps became increasingly apparent. They conveyed a worldview in which observation, ethics, and cognition were inseparable. Navigation was not merely about reaching a destination. It was about understanding relationships, discerning patterns, and aligning human activity with broader natural and cosmic order. The maps functioned as guides to thought as much as guides to terrain, embedding lessons in patience, observation, interpretation, and moral reasoning. In studying them, the explorers were being inducted into a centuries-old pedagogy designed to cultivate insight, responsibility, and intellectual rigor. By the conclusion of this phase, the explorers recognized that the maps were more than artifacts. They were living documents, deliberately designed to transmit knowledge, test perception, and prepare seekers for deeper revelations. They were both practical and philosophical, tangible and symbolic, historical and timeless. Through the maps, the vanished civilization communicated across centuries, offering guidance to those capable of understanding the intertwined nature of the physical world, intellectual inquiry, and ethical reflection. The expedition left the study of these maps with a profound sense of humility and awe. Here was a civilization that had anticipated the curiosity of future generations, creating instruments of learning and discovery that combined artistry, intellect, and foresight in ways modern society had rarely seen. The maps were a testament to human ingenuity, an invitation to explore not only landscapes, but the deeper structures of knowledge and perception. They were the civilization's voice echoing through time, guiding, testing, and inspiring those willing to listen and engage. As the explorers delved deeper into the ruins, it became clear that this vanished civilization had left behind more than stone structures and artifacts. It had buried its knowledge in deliberate, almost cryptic forms. Walls and pillars were adorned with inscriptions, symbols, and patterns that seemed to blend language, mathematics, and cosmology. Each engraving hinted at ideas far beyond the understanding of contemporary scholars, suggesting a society that had mastered both the material and intellectual worlds. Every detail demanded attention. Even the smallest etching could hold a secret, a fragment of knowledge that, once decoded, might illuminate the civilization's history and achievements. Scrolls, some painstakingly preserved in hidden niches or stone-lined chambers, offered another layer of revelation. Written in scripts that had long been lost to memory, they appeared at first glance indecipherable, yet contained astonishingly advanced concepts. Mathematical calculations that suggested astronomical knowledge, diagrams depicting technologies that seemed impossibly sophisticated for the time, and philosophical treatises hinting at an understanding of the human psyche all emerged from these fragile documents. The explorers realized that they were not merely uncovering remnants of the past. They were encountering a civilization that had deliberately encoded its wisdom, preserving it across centuries for those capable of understanding. The stone carvings themselves were equally mesmerizing. Some depicted elaborate cityscapes, complete with aqueducts, public spaces, and temples aligned to celestial events. Others illustrated scenes of ritual, governance, and knowledge transfer, hinting at a society that valued learning and order. One particularly striking mural depicted a sequence of symbols that seemed to correspond with known constellations, suggesting that the civilization tracked celestial cycles with extraordinary precision. It was clear that these people had achieved a level of sophistication that challenged conventional historical timelines, forcing the explorers to reconsider everything they thought they knew about technological and intellectual advancement in the ancient world. Among the most intriguing discoveries were symbols that appeared repeatedly, as if encoded intentionally to guide the initiated. Some were geometric, precise, almost mathematical in their arrangement, while others seemed to convey moral or spiritual concepts. The repetition suggested a deliberate system of communication, a layered method of transmitting knowledge that was both accessible and hidden. Scholars in the expedition began painstakingly documenting these symbols, comparing them to ancient texts from other regions, and gradually piecing together connections that hinted at a civilization whose influence may have extended far beyond the immediate ruins. It was not just the content of the stone and scrolls that fascinated the explorers, but the context in which they were found. Many inscriptions were located in places that required effort or skill to reach. Narrow chambers hidden behind false walls, elevated terraces, or underground tunnels that had survived centuries of decay. The civilization seemed to have intended that its knowledge would not be easily accessible, safeguarding its wisdom while leaving breadcrumbs for those determined enough to seek it. This created a sense of tension and excitement. Every new chamber, every hidden inscription felt like a deliberate invitation into the civilization's inner world. The expedition also encountered fragments of codices that hinted at technologies previously unknown to history. Diagrams suggested mechanical devices, complex water systems, and tools that indicated a mastery of engineering lost to time. Some objects bore markings that resembled early electrical or astronomical instruments, hinting at a scientific understanding far beyond what scholars had attributed to the period. The combination of intellectual sophistication and practical application revealed a civilization deeply attuned to both observation and innovation, a society that had left its imprint not only in stone, but also in the conceptual frameworks that guided its development. Religious and philosophical dimensions emerged from these discoveries as well. Ritual scenes depicted on walls, and philosophical musings embedded in scrolls suggested a culture that sought to unify knowledge of the cosmos, society, and the self. The explorers began to see patterns, linkages between celestial observation, governance, and spirituality, that revealed a civilization far more integrated and thoughtful than any known contemporary society. Each discovery acted as both revelation and puzzle, offering answers while simultaneously raising new questions about the civilization's origin, purpose, and eventual disappearance. Perhaps the most profound realization came when the explorers noticed that the stone and scrolls were not isolated. They formed a cohesive system of knowledge. Architecture, artifacts, inscriptions, and written texts all worked in concert, suggesting that the civilization had designed its environment as a living repository of wisdom. The ruins were more than buildings. They were a deliberate record, a multidimensional archive meant to convey understanding to those capable of decoding it. For the expedition, this meant that every observation mattered. Every detail could lead to insights, and the civilization's secrets, though hidden, were still accessible to those willing to look carefully and think deeply. By the end of their initial survey, the explorers realized that they had entered a world of layered complexity, where history, knowledge, and mystery were intertwined. The clues buried in stone and scrolls were not merely artifacts. They were keys to understanding a civilization whose sophistication challenged everything the world thought it knew. With each new symbol deciphered and each hidden chamber explored, the expedition stepped further into a narrative deliberately constructed to endure, to intrigue, and to reveal the extraordinary in a world that had almost been lost to memory. No great discovery comes without controversy. As the expedition began to piece together the fragments of the vanished civilization, word of their findings slowly spread, drawing the attention of scholars, institutions, and rival explorers. Not all were intrigued by the promise of revelation. Some were skeptical, dismissive, or openly hostile. The tension was palpable, a shadow cast over the expedition by those who either feared that conventional history would be challenged, or who sought to control, reinterpret, or claim the discoveries for themselves. From the outset, it became clear that unearthing the past was not simply a matter of courage or skill. It also required navigating a labyrinth of politics, academic rivalry, and deliberate suppression. Mainstream scholars, particularly those invested in accepted historical narratives, were quick to question the expedition's claims. Maps were dismissed as imaginative fabrications. Artifacts were labeled as misinterpretations. Inscriptions were argued to be symbolic exaggerations rather than evidence of lost knowledge. Some historians went further, implying that the explorers had allowed wishful thinking to override rigorous methodology. This created a profound sense of isolation for the expedition. Their discoveries were tangible, yet they were trapped between the validation of evidence and the rigid boundaries of institutional authority. The civilization they had found was real, yet the academic world seemed determined to keep it in shadow. Rival expeditions posed another challenge. As word spread, competing groups began retracing the explorers' route, often with less expertise but greater access to resources and political backing. These rivals were sometimes motivated by ambition, sometimes by greed, and occasionally by a desire to control the narrative of discovery. They arrived armed with advanced equipment, funding, and sometimes a dismissive arrogance toward the original explorers' methods. The subtle psychological warfare became as formidable as any physical obstacle. Deliberate misinformation, misdirection, and attempts to discredit findings created a constant tension, forcing the expedition to balance progress with caution. Every new discovery had to be carefully documented, sometimes hidden, and always protected against those who would reshape it to fit their own agendas. Even among the expedition members, pressure mounted. Differences in opinion, fear of failure, and the weight of responsibility created internal conflict. Some feared that the civilization's secrets were too powerful or dangerous to reveal publicly. Others argued that humanity had the right and the need to know. These philosophical divides were mirrored in interactions with the broader world of scholarship, where ideological rigidity often clashed with the radical implications of the findings. The expedition became a delicate dance between revelation and secrecy, between ambition and caution, a microcosm of the tension surrounding suppressed history itself. Suppression, however, extended beyond academic politics. Certain institutions, mysterious patrons, secret societies, and possibly governmental interests watched the expedition closely. Whispers suggested that the civilization had left behind knowledge considered too potent, too disruptive, or too revolutionary to enter mainstream understanding. Some of these hidden observers subtly influenced public discourse, ensuring that reports of discoveries were questioned, dismissed, or delayed. The explorers began to sense that they were navigating not only the physical remnants of the civilization, but also the shadowy forces that had long sought to keep its knowledge hidden. History, it seemed, had layers of protection designed to preserve the secrets of those who had come before. Despite these obstacles, the expedition persevered. The tension, rather than deterring them, sharpened their focus. Every encounter with rival scholars, every subtle act of suppression, reinforced the significance of what they had uncovered. They realized that the civilization's disappearance was not merely a product of natural disaster or decline. It had also been actively erased from memory, safeguarded by both time and human intervention. Each new stone, each scroll, each encoded symbol became not only a clue to the civilization's brilliance, but also a testament to the lengths it had gone to preserve its knowledge against forces that might misuse or ignore it. In many ways, the shadow of suppression mirrored the civilization itself. Just as the ruins concealed knowledge in stone, scrolls, and architecture, so too did modern authorities attempt to control, reinterpret, or obscure the truth. The expedition's challenge was to navigate both realms: the physical remnants of the vanished civilization and the ideological obstacles of a world that preferred conformity over revelation. Every success in discovery, every artifact documented and preserved, became a small act of resistance against forces determined to suppress history, reaffirming the expedition's role as not just explorers, but as guardians of truth. By confronting rival scholars, secretive institutions, and the weight of conventional historical authority, the expedition began to understand a crucial lesson. The path to knowledge is never linear, never safe, and never uncontested. The vanished civilization had been hidden, yet their traces endured, challenging the world to question assumptions, confront suppression, and seek the extraordinary within the ordinary. The shadow of suppression was formidable, but it also illuminated the value of perseverance, intellect, and courage, showing that discovery is as much about navigating the politics of knowledge as it is about uncovering the past. Amid the ruins and inscriptions, the expedition began to uncover evidence of technologies and knowledge that seemed far beyond the capabilities of civilizations traditionally recognized in history. Tools, mechanisms, and architectural feats suggested a mastery of engineering, astronomy, and physics that challenged the very framework of historical understanding. Some objects appeared simple at first glance: polished stones, metallic implements, and carved wood, but closer inspection revealed functionality that baffled even the most seasoned scholars. Each discovery forced a reconsideration of what humanity was capable of in the distant past, and hinted at a civilization whose wisdom had been deliberately concealed from posterity. One of the most striking examples was the water management system embedded in the ruins. Channels, aqueducts, and reservoirs were constructed with remarkable precision, directing water over long distances, controlling flow, and maintaining irrigation for large-scale agriculture. Some features suggested a sophisticated understanding of hydrodynamics, including pressure regulation and erosion control. It was clear that the civilization had not only adapted to its environment, but had mastered it, creating infrastructure that would rival modern engineering feats. The discovery raised profound questions. How had they acquired such knowledge, and why had it disappeared from the historical record? Mechanical devices were equally remarkable. Fragments of gears, pulleys, and mechanisms hinted at tools and machines that could perform complex tasks, perhaps even automate labor in ways previously thought impossible for the era. Scholars in the expedition speculated about applications ranging from construction to astronomical observation. Some devices appeared linked to celestial tracking, suggesting that the civilization had a highly advanced understanding of astronomy, potentially integrating it with their societal and spiritual practices. The hidden technologies revealed a society that not only survived but thrived on the edge of innovation, leaving behind traces of knowledge deliberately embedded in both artifacts and architecture. Astronomy, in particular, played a central role in understanding the civilization's sophistication. Observations recorded in inscriptions, architectural alignments, and even landscape modifications demonstrated precise tracking of celestial movements, eclipses, and seasonal cycles. Temples, monuments, and observatories were all positioned with deliberate accuracy, often aligned with solstices, equinoxes, or particular star clusters. The explorers realized that the civilization had created a comprehensive system linking the heavens and the earth, reflecting both practical understanding and philosophical or spiritual significance. Knowledge of the cosmos was encoded not merely for observation, but for guidance, governance, and ritual, illustrating a depth of insight lost to modern history. The lost wisdom extended beyond practical knowledge into abstract ideas and philosophy. Scrolls and inscriptions hinted at principles of mathematics, logic, and ethics that suggested a civilization capable of deep conceptual thought. Some texts described complex systems of governance and social organization, emphasizing cooperation, education, and ethical responsibility. Others explored metaphysical or cosmological ideas, reflecting a worldview that integrated human existence with natural and celestial cycles. For the expedition, these discoveries created the sense of encountering a civilization whose intellectual and spiritual sophistication rivaled, or even surpassed, that of later societies often considered advanced. Yet this hidden knowledge was not always easily interpretable. Symbols and diagrams were encoded, layered with multiple meanings, requiring careful study to understand their purpose. The civilization seemed to have deliberately created a system of preservation that both revealed and concealed, rewarding insight and patience while discouraging casual observers. Some devices remained enigmatic, their functions speculative even after repeated attempts at reconstruction. This interplay of revelation and concealment added to the sense of wonder, making each discovery both thrilling and humbling, a reminder that knowledge can endure even when obscured from the broader world. The implications of uncovering such technologies and wisdom were profound. They suggested that human history is far more complex than commonly understood, and that civilizations capable of extraordinary achievements may have existed, only to be lost or deliberately suppressed. The expedition began to recognize a pattern. This was not a civilization destroyed by accident, but one whose knowledge had been protected, encoded, and hidden, intentionally surviving in fragments. The ruins, devices, and scrolls together formed a record, a repository of wisdom meant to endure through time, awaiting those willing to interpret it. Each new technological insight or philosophical fragment added layers of intrigue to the expedition's journey. Every observation hinted at a civilization that was not only advanced but also deliberate in the preservation of its legacy. The explorers realized that what they were uncovering was not merely physical evidence, but a comprehensive system of knowledge, a civilization's attempt to communicate across centuries, embedding its understanding of the world in stone, metal, and ink. The challenge was not just discovery, but interpretation, bridging the gap between past and present to understand what had been hidden for so long. By the end of their initial examination, the expedition had begun to grasp the magnitude of what they were uncovering. Hidden technologies, advanced engineering, astronomical precision, and profound philosophical insight were all part of a civilization carefully encoded to survive beyond its apparent disappearance. The lost wisdom was tangible, yet tantalizingly incomplete, demanding patience, intellect, and imagination to piece together. In uncovering these secrets, the explorers were stepping into the heart of a civilization whose brilliance had been deliberately veiled, a civilization whose knowledge had endured in whispers, stone, and scrolls, waiting for rediscovery. Among the ruins, certain locations stood out, not because of size or grandeur, but because of the aura of deliberate sanctity that enveloped them. These sacred sites were more than ceremonial grounds. They were the focal points of the civilization's understanding of the cosmos, society, and human consciousness. Temples, altars, and stone circles were carefully aligned with celestial bodies, rivers, and mountain ranges, suggesting an intricate system of spiritual and practical knowledge intertwined. To the explorers, it quickly became evident that these sites were designed not only for ritual, but for the preservation and transmission of knowledge across generations. The architecture of the sacred sites was both enigmatic and purposeful. Massive stone blocks were placed with precision, often without mortar, forming walls and platforms that have withstood centuries of weather and seismic activity. Some chambers were hidden, accessible only through narrow passages or requiring keen observation to locate, suggesting a civilization deeply concerned with safeguarding its rituals and secrets. Carvings and inscriptions adorned these spaces, depicting cosmic cycles, religious ceremonies, and symbolic narratives that linked human experience with celestial patterns. For the expedition, every structure was a puzzle. Every angle, every alignment, and every engraving a clue to understanding the civilization's worldview. Astronomical alignment was particularly striking. Temples faced solstices and equinoxes. Stone markers corresponded to star positions, and shadow patterns at specific times of the year revealed encoded messages. These alignments were not random. They suggested that the civilization had mapped the heavens with extraordinary precision and incorporated this knowledge into its spiritual and daily practices. The explorers realized that the sacred sites functioned as living observatories, blending science and spirituality in a manner rarely seen in other ancient civilizations. Each observation revealed the civilization's dual focus, practical understanding of the world, and a profound reverence for forces beyond immediate human comprehension. Artifacts discovered at the sacred sites offered further insight into ceremonial life and ritual knowledge. Intricately crafted vessels, ritual tools, and symbolic ornaments suggested sophisticated practices in art, metallurgy, and material culture. Some objects bore inscriptions hinting at ethical or philosophical principles, while others appear to encode knowledge about astronomy, mathematics, or healing. The variety and sophistication of these artifacts painted a picture of a civilization that integrated intellectual, spiritual, and practical knowledge, creating a holistic approach to life that is almost entirely absent from conventional historical narratives. Inscriptions found at the sacred sites often carried multiple layers of meaning. Pictographs, abstract symbols, and diagrams overlapped with what appeared to be mathematical or astronomical notations. Deciphering them required not only linguistic expertise, but also an understanding of the civilization's conceptual framework. For the explorers, this multi-layered communication was both thrilling and challenging. Each symbol or carving could simultaneously convey religious significance, practical instruction, and philosophical insight, reinforcing the notion that the sacred sites were designed to educate, preserve, and challenge those who approached with curiosity and discernment. The spatial layout of the sacred sites reinforced the civilization's sophisticated planning. Pathways, terraces, and water channels were deliberately arranged to guide movement and observation. Entering a temple or circle was not merely a physical act. It was a journey intended to shape perception, understanding, and experience. Observers could not fully comprehend the significance of a site without engaging with it actively. Moving through the spaces, observing alignments, and interpreting inscriptions. The civilization had created immersive environments that blended architecture, landscape, and knowledge, transforming sacred sites into interactive repositories of wisdom. Evidence also suggested that some sacred sites were centers for advanced teaching and experimentation. Patterns in the ruins indicated spaces for observation, calculation, and possibly experimentation in astronomy, engineering, or even medicinal practices. The integration of ritual and study reflected a culture in which intellectual and spiritual life were inseparable. Knowledge was encoded in action, movement, and ritual, requiring participation and attention to fully appreciate. The explorers began to understand that the civilization had designed its sacred sites as both spiritual and educational arenas, where the pursuit of insight was intertwined with reverence and discipline. The explorers could not ignore the possibility that these sacred sites served as both protective and communicative tools. Hidden chambers, encoded inscriptions, and strategic alignments suggested a civilization intent on preserving its legacy while concealing its most sensitive knowledge from casual observers or future intruders. The interplay of concealment and revelation created a sense of tension and excitement, making each discovery feel like a moment of triumph against time and secrecy. Every artifact, every carving, and every alignment became a piece of the puzzle, slowly revealing the civilization's mastery over both material and intellectual realms. By the end of their initial exploration of the sacred sites, the expedition realized that they had entered a realm where architecture, astronomy, ritual, and philosophy converged. These were not merely remnants of religious practice. They were deliberate constructs designed to preserve knowledge, guide behavior, and encode a worldview that integrated human, terrestrial, and celestial understanding. The sacred sites stood as a testament to a civilization whose sophistication, foresight, and depth of insight far exceeded what conventional history had recorded, offering a tantalizing glimpse into the genius of a people lost to time, yet echoing powerfully through their preserved creations. As the expedition penetrated deeper into the remnants of the vanished civilization, it became evident that the creators had not left their knowledge unprotected. Hidden within forests, atop cliffs, and within labyrinthine valleys were intricate systems of guardianship, mechanisms, symbols, and even environmental designs intended to regulate access. These guardians were not mere traps. They were sophisticated tests of perception, patience, and intellect, carefully calibrated to ensure that only those capable of understanding the civilization's deeper principles could proceed. The expedition quickly recognized that the Guardians were an integral part of the civilization's teaching methodology, blending practicality, philosophy, and foresight into a single, immersive system. The first type of Guardian encountered was architectural in nature. Many ruins included corridors, stairways, and chambers that appeared straightforward at first glance but concealed subtle complexities. Certain doors required precise alignment of stones or the manipulation of hidden levers to open, while some hallways were intentionally disorienting, with mirrored surfaces, false passages, or angled walls that distorted perception. These features were more than security measures. They were lessons in observation, spatial reasoning, and the consequences of attention to detail. Every misstep taught a lesson. Every success reinforced the need for patience, caution, and careful interpretation. The civilization had transformed architecture into a medium for ethical and intellectual training. Environmental guardians were equally sophisticated. The civilization had harnessed natural phenomena to protect and guide knowledge. Shadows cast at particular times of day illuminated inscriptions otherwise invisible, while reflective pools and water channels revealed hidden carvings when sunlight interacted with their surfaces. Certain cliff faces or terraces were positioned to trigger auditory cues, such as echoing sounds or resonance, alerting explorers to hidden chambers or warning of misdirection. These environmental mechanisms demonstrated a profound understanding of perception and psychology, creating a dynamic system that required explorers to observe, interpret, and respond appropriately. Nature itself became a teacher, and misreading its cues carried consequences. Symbolic guardians formed another critical layer. Throughout ruins, artifacts, and pathways, recurring patterns, symbols, and inscriptions acted as checkpoints, codes, or moral tests. Some inscriptions presented hypothetical scenarios, philosophical questions, or ethical dilemmas, challenging explorers to apply reasoning and judgment rather than brute force or guesswork. Others combined numerical, geometric, and linguistic elements that had to be decoded sequentially to reveal the next stage of access. These symbolic guardians demonstrated that the civilization valued intellect, reflection, and ethical discernment, embedding these principles directly into the architecture and artifacts of their world. Mechanical guardians added an extraordinary dimension to the civilization's protective measures. Some devices, partially preserved and surprisingly complex, appeared to function as locks, timers, or interactive tools that revealed hidden compartments when manipulated correctly. Others seemed to incorporate astronomical alignments, requiring observations of celestial events to operate. The level of engineering sophistication was astonishing, revealing a civilization that had mastered not only philosophy and art, but also technology at a level far beyond contemporaneous societies. The Guardians, therefore, were not merely passive obstacles, but interactive instruments designed to train, evaluate, and guide those who sought access to deeper knowledge. The Guardian's cumulative effect was as psychological as it was physical or intellectual. Isolation, environmental pressures, and the complexity of tasks created tension and heightened focus. Explorers were compelled to remain aware of their surroundings at all times, to question assumptions, and to approach challenges with humility. Failure was instructive. Success required integration of multiple faculties: observation, reasoning, ethical judgment, and physical skill. By designing this multidimensional system, the civilization ensured that its knowledge would not be trivially obtained, but earned through perseverance, insight, and careful engagement. The Guardians were teachers as much as they were protectors. Certain Guardians required collaboration. Some challenges could not be solved alone. Multiple explorers had to synchronize actions, communicate subtle observations, or combine insights to progress. These cooperative mechanisms suggested that the civilization understood the value of social intelligence, empathy, and coordination. Knowledge was presented as both individual and collective responsibility. The Guardians reinforced the principle that wisdom is not only a personal achievement, but also a relational practice, requiring interaction, communication, and shared effort. In this sense, the civilization anticipated that future seekers would need to develop both intellectual and interpersonal faculties to fully comprehend its teachings. Many of the Guardians were temporally activated, relying on cycles of nature or celestial events. Shadows, light, and sound shifted over time, revealing hidden pathways or clues only when observed under precise conditions. Some inscriptions and devices interacted with solstices, equinoxes, or lunar cycles, creating a rhythm that aligned exploration with cosmic patterns. The civilization had integrated temporal awareness into guardianship, emphasizing patience, observation, and alignment with natural order. This approach underscored a worldview in which knowledge, ethics, and cosmology were inseparable, teaching that wisdom arises from harmony with both the environment and the rhythms of the universe. Explorers also began to notice that some Guardians functioned as meta-lessons, reflecting on the very nature of discovery. Misinterpretation, impatience, or overconfidence often triggered dead ends or misleading cues. Success required humility, perseverance, and the willingness to re-evaluate assumptions continually. The civilization had created a dynamic dialogue, where the seeker's approach became part of the learning experience. The Guardians, in this sense, were living instructors, shaping not only access to information, but also the cognitive and moral development of those who encountered them. The expedition's encounters with the Guardians culminated in a profound understanding. The vanished civilization had anticipated not only the preservation of knowledge, but the cultivation of wisdom. Guardians were not arbitrary. They were an integral part of the civilization's educational and ethical philosophy, designed to ensure that those who reached the ultimate chambers were prepared intellectually, morally, and psychologically. The system was both protective and generative, creating a rigorous yet transformative journey for every explorer. By the end of this phase of exploration, the team recognized that the Guardians had served their purpose. They had guided, tested, and instructed, shaping the expedition into competent seekers capable of understanding the civilization's deeper revelations. Each obstacle surmounted, each puzzle decoded, and each environmental cue interpreted became a milestone in a carefully orchestrated process of learning. The civilization had not only safeguarded its knowledge, it had ensured that its transmission required engagement, reflection, and transformation. The Guardians of Hidden Knowledge were not merely sentinels of the past. They were mentors designed to educate across centuries. Ultimately, the expedition realized that these Guardians exemplified the civilization's mastery of foresight, psychology, and pedagogy. By blending physical, intellectual, ethical, and environmental challenges, the civilization had created a holistic system that ensured knowledge would endure while remaining accessible only to those prepared to earn it. The Guardians were a testament to the civilization's understanding of human nature, learning, and the responsibilities inherent in accessing great wisdom. They transformed the journey into a process of initiation, preparing explorers not only to uncover hidden knowledge, but to internalize the principles that had guided an extraordinary society long vanished from history.
Deep within the heart of the ruins lay the forbidden chambers, spaces the civilization had gone to great lengths to conceal, protect, and mystify. Unlike the more accessible temples, terraces, and sacred sites, these chambers were hidden behind false walls, narrow passages, and secret doors that required both insight and persistence to discover. The expedition quickly realized that entry into these rooms was not merely a matter of brute force or luck. It demanded understanding the subtle cues left by a civilization that had mastered concealment as much as creation. Each chamber carried a sense of foreboding, a palpable warning that the knowledge within was not meant for the uninitiated. The first chamber the explorers accessed revealed a collection of artifacts and inscriptions unlike anything seen previously. Large stone slabs bore carvings that appeared to be a mixture of pictographs and abstract symbols, layered with meaning and arranged in a sequence that suggested narrative. Scrolls, carefully stored in stone-lined niches, contained diagrams and formulas that hinted at advanced mathematics, astronomy, and mechanics. Every object seemed to pulse with significance, as though the civilization had intentionally imbued these chambers with both danger and revelation. The forbidden chambers were designed to test the mind and spirit, challenging explorers to engage fully with their contents rather than merely observe. Architectural design within the chambers reinforced this notion. Corridors twisted unexpectedly, floors sloped at subtle angles, and stairways occasionally ended abruptly, forcing explorers to retrace their steps and reconsider their approach. The civilization had incorporated both physical and cognitive obstacles, creating an environment that demanded attention, ingenuity, and patience. Light played a role as well. Openings in ceilings and walls allowed sunlight to fall on inscriptions and artifacts at specific times of day or year, revealing hidden details or patterns that were invisible at other times. These chambers were as much instruments of learning as they were repositories of knowledge, blending architecture, light, and symbolism into a sophisticated system of protection and instruction. Among the most extraordinary discoveries were devices that defied easy explanation, mechanical contraptions with interlocking gears, carved stones with precise calibrations, and metallic instruments whose purpose was not immediately evident hinted at technologies lost to history. Some devices appear to function in conjunction with celestial observations, suggesting applications in tracking solar or lunar cycles, calculating seasons, or even predicting eclipses. Others seem symbolic, representing abstract concepts or philosophical principles rather than purely practical functions. The forbidden chambers revealed a civilization that had fused technology, philosophy, and ritual into an integrated system, leaving behind a legacy that challenged contemporary understanding. The inscriptions were equally compelling. Many combined abstract symbols with literal depictions, encoding layers of meaning intended for the careful observer. Some inscriptions reference cosmic principles, aligning human knowledge with the cycles of stars and planets. Others appear to describe the ethics of leadership, governance, and social responsibility, indicating that the civilization valued moral insight alongside intellectual and technical skill. The explorers realized that these chambers were designed to transmit a comprehensive worldview, encompassing science, spirituality, and philosophy in a manner deliberately safeguarded from those unprepared to understand it. Ritual artifacts added yet another layer of intrigue. Ceremonial vessels, carved figurines, and ritual implements suggested practices that were both spiritual and instructional. Some objects, when placed in specific positions or orientations, appear to interact with the environment, casting shadows or aligning with light to reveal inscriptions or patterns. The civilization had embedded layers of interaction into the chambers, requiring explorers to engage physically, mentally, and intuitively with the spaces to access their full meaning. In this sense, the forbidden chambers were not simply repositories. They were living lessons, demanding active participation to unlock their secrets. The psychological impact on the expedition was profound. The chambers conveyed a sense of presence, as if the civilization itself was observing the explorers' actions, testing their insight, patience, and dedication. The combination of danger, mystery, and revelation heightened tension and curiosity, creating an almost cinematic experience in which every movement, every observation carried weight. The explorers began to recognize that the chambers were designed to evoke a heightened state of awareness, a form of intellectual and spiritual trial that mirrored the civilization's own values and priorities. Despite the inherent challenges, the expedition pressed on, carefully documenting and studying every artifact, inscription, and architectural feature. They understood that the forbidden chambers represented a core of knowledge deliberately hidden, and that the civilization had intended these spaces to survive across centuries, accessible only to those capable of rigorous observation and interpretation. Each new discovery provided both insight and further questions, deepening the mystery and reinforcing the civilization's mastery of concealment, preservation, and layered wisdom. By the time the initial exploration of the Forbidden Chambers concluded, the expedition had gained not only artifacts and data, but profound understanding of the civilization's strategy for knowledge preservation. These chambers demonstrated that the vanished civilization had anticipated the passage of time, the limitations of human perception, and the threats of misinterpretation. In protecting its secrets while offering carefully designed opportunities for discovery, the civilization had ensured that only those willing to approach with diligence, patience, and intellect could access its deepest truths, a challenge the expedition was now beginning to meet.
Among the most astonishing discoveries in the ruins was a series of maps, meticulously etched onto stone slabs, scrolls, and metallic sheets, depicting not only the known lands of the civilization, but also hidden realms that defied conventional geography. Unlike ordinary cartography, these maps combined precision with enigma, blending topographical accuracy with symbolic representations of territories, routes, and sacred spaces. For the expedition, encountering the map of hidden realms was like stepping into a multidimensional puzzle. Every line, curve, and marking appeared deliberate, yet its meaning remained tantalizingly elusive. The maps promised revelation, but only to those capable of seeing beyond the obvious, of decoding both the literal and hidden layers embedded within. The initial examination revealed that these maps were not simply geographical tools. They were repositories of knowledge, combining practical navigation with philosophical and spiritual instruction. Some areas were marked with celestial symbols, indicating alignment with stars, solstices, or astronomical phenomena. Rivers, valleys, and mountain ranges were traced with unusual precision, but also encoded with cryptic symbols suggesting ritual significance, historical events, or hidden resources. The explorers quickly realized that the maps served a dual purpose. They guided travelers physically across terrain and intellectually through the civilization's understanding of the world. One of the most intriguing aspects of the maps was their depiction of hidden realms, locations not documented in any other historical record. Some appeared as islands obscured by legend, others as valleys or plateaus that had been deliberately concealed from outsiders. Paths between these regions were often marked with symbols that suggested trials, guardians, or necessary knowledge to navigate them safely. These hidden realms were more than places. They were conceptual territories, designed to test the understanding, skill, and insight of those who sought to reach them. For the expedition, following these maps was both a literal journey through uncharted land and a figurative journey into the depths of the civilization's philosophy and strategy for knowledge preservation. The map's craftsmanship revealed extraordinary sophistication. Lines were precise, proportional, and in some cases aligned with magnetic or celestial phenomena, suggesting a deep understanding of geophysics and astronomy. Elevations, rivers, and natural features were represented with accuracy that surpassed many contemporary maps of the era. Yet these technical accomplishments were interwoven with artistic flourishes, symbolic notations, and encoded messages, creating a fusion of science, art, and mysticism. Every detail demanded careful study. Missing even a subtle marking could lead to misinterpretation or worse, failure in accessing the hidden realms. Some maps included layered or foldable sections, where certain information became visible only when aligned in specific ways with light, perspective, or accompanying artifacts. This design reflected a civilization that valued secrecy, intelligence, and active engagement over passive observation. The explorers realized that the maps were not meant for casual consumption. They were interactive, requiring the seeker to think, interpret, and apply knowledge practically and symbolically. In essence, the civilization had encoded a series of intellectual challenges directly into the landscape of the maps themselves. Analysis of the symbols on the maps suggested a complex system of meaning, blending astronomy, mathematics, and metaphysics. Some markings corresponded with celestial cycles, while others appeared to indicate moral or philosophical pathways. Rivers, mountains, and valleys were not only geographical markers, but also signifiers of knowledge or ethical trials. For the explorers, this added layers of tension and fascination. The maps were more than instructions. They were tests, designed to ensure that only those capable of insight, patience, and interpretation could traverse the hidden realm successfully. Following the maps became a delicate balance of observation, deduction, and courage. The expedition had to cross landscapes that were physically challenging, dense forests, treacherous rivers, and rugged mountains, while simultaneously interpreting symbols, alignments, and encoded directions. Each step was fraught with uncertainty. A misreading of the map could lead the explorers away from the intended path or into danger. Yet with each successful interpretation, they gained not only progress through the terrain, but also deeper insight into the civilization's intelligence and worldview. The maps revealed a society that had anticipated centuries of exploration, designing challenges that tested body, mind, and spirit. The map of hidden realms also suggested connections beyond geography. Certain regions aligned with sacred sites, hidden chambers, and technological installations discovered earlier. The explorers realized that the civilization's entire landscape had been encoded with purpose, linking space, knowledge, and spiritual practice into an integrated system. It was a revelation that the civilization had orchestrated a multidimensional network of wisdom, using the very earth as both classroom and repository. Each map, then, was not merely a guide. It was an invitation into a deeper understanding of the civilization's philosophy, science, and mastery of the natural and metaphysical worlds. As the expedition studied these maps, a sense of awe and urgency took hold. The hidden realms represented the culmination of centuries of thought, planning, and preservation. They were places where knowledge, technology, and philosophy converged, spaces that held the potential to redefine understanding of human history. The explorers began to grasp that following these maps was not just an act of discovery. It was a responsibility. The civilization had left a path, but it demanded discernment, respect, and intellectual rigor to traverse it safely. Every insight gained from the maps illuminated not just the lost civilization, but the very nature of human curiosity and the lengths to which a society might go to protect, encode, and transmit its wisdom across generations. The journey along the hidden path was unlike any other expedition the team had ever undertaken. What initially appeared as a simple trail winding through forests and mountains gradually revealed itself as a deliberate and intricate system of tests, designed not only to protect knowledge, but to cultivate those capable of understanding it. From the moment they entered the first marked point on the path, the explorers were confronted with challenges that seemed to transcend ordinary obstacles, merging the physical, intellectual, and spiritual into a single, continuous trial. Each step forward was a negotiation between endurance, observation, and insight, and every wrong turn carried subtle consequences, sometimes delay, sometimes disorientation, sometimes near peril. The first challenges were physical yet instructional. Narrow ridges forced careful footing, rivers and streams demanded ingenuity to cross, and sudden drops or concealed ledges tested agility and spatial awareness. But even these physical trials were intertwined with lessons. Carvings on nearby rocks or the placement of stones suggested safe routes or hinted at hidden footholds, demanding both attention and interpretation. The civilization had intentionally blurred the line between obstacle and guidance, creating a system in which every encounter required critical thinking. The explorers began to understand that success depended not solely on strength or courage, but on the ability to observe, reflect, and apply knowledge gleaned from subtle cues in the environment. As the expedition progressed, the intellectual complexity of the trials became apparent. Inscriptions, geometric patterns, and celestial alignments appeared with increasing frequency, each demanding interpretation to unlock the next stage of the path. Some carvings included sequences of numbers or symbols that required calculation or pattern recognition. Others incorporated astronomical markers, revealing guidance only when the sun or moon fell at precise angles. The civilization had designed these intellectual trials to be inseparable from the physical journey. Observation and reasoning were required alongside endurance and navigation. The explorers realized that the hidden path functioned as a multi-layered curriculum, testing every aspect of human perception and understanding simultaneously. Psychological challenges compounded the difficulty of the path. Isolation, fatigue, and the sheer scale of the journey created moments of doubt, frustration, and disorientation. The explorers experienced a heightened awareness of time, space, and their own limitations. Shadows fell in misleading ways, echoes distorted perception, and subtle environmental cues could either guide or mislead. The civilization had clearly anticipated the psychological pressures of exploration, embedding an almost theatrical manipulation of perception into the terrain. These trials forced participants to slow down, pay attention, and develop patience, reinforcing the idea that the path was as much a test of character and mental acuity as it was a journey through physical space. The interplay of natural phenomena with constructed elements was particularly striking. At specific points, the alignment of rocks, trees, and ridges created visual markers or revealed hidden inscriptions at particular times of day. Light filtering through openings in cliffs illuminated symbols that remained invisible for hours or even days. Streams were channeled in ways that reflected sound patterns, creating auditory cues that guided or signaled. The civilization had seamlessly integrated the natural environment into their system of trials, ensuring that understanding required an intimate engagement with the world around them. It was as if the path itself was a living teacher, responding to observation and reflection, rewarding those who approached with care and insight. Some challenges tested social and ethical reasoning. Certain inscriptions presented hypothetical scenarios or moral dilemmas, requiring explorers to interpret symbolic representations and decide how to act. Others involved collaboration, where multiple participants had to synchronize actions or communicate subtle observations to progress. The civilization had embedded ethical instruction into the very structure of the path, suggesting that wisdom was inseparable from morality. Each success along the trail was not merely a physical or intellectual victory, but an affirmation of the explorer's ability to navigate complexity, uncertainty, and ethical ambiguity. Artifacts discovered along the hidden path added another layer of challenge and instruction. Small mechanical devices, partially buried tools, and ritual objects often had dual purposes, functional and symbolic. Some devices required manipulation to reveal hidden compartments or inscriptions. Others provided clues when interpreted alongside environmental markers. Each interaction demanded patience, observation, and careful experimentation. The civilization had embedded lessons in action, teaching that engagement and insight were inseparable from discovery. By interacting with these artifacts, explorers were not only solving practical problems, but internalizing the civilization's philosophy. Knowledge is earned through effort, reflection, and respect for complexity. Celestial alignments remained a constant thread throughout the trials. Observing the sun, moon, and stars in relation to markers on the path revealed critical information for navigation, timing, and interpretation. Certain alignments illuminated carvings or created patterns that indicated the next stage, while others confirmed the explorer's progress or highlighted errors. The hidden path functioned as a multidimensional learning system, where mastery of natural observation, mathematical reasoning, and symbolic interpretation was required to succeed. These celestial components reinforced the civilization's understanding that wisdom emerges from alignment between mind and environment, action and observation, morality and insight. Over time, the cumulative effect of the trials became transformative. The explorers noted a gradual sharpening of perception, increased patience, and deeper understanding of patterns in nature and human thought. Each obstacle, intellectual puzzle, and ethical consideration prepared them for the ultimate revelations awaiting at the end of the path. The civilization had created a journey in which the process of discovery was inseparable from the development of insight. By the time the expedition reached the penultimate stages, they were not merely navigating terrain. They were being shaped by it, trained to perceive, think, and reflect in ways the civilization had long ago anticipated. In the final stages, the hidden path revealed glimpses of what lay ahead. Distant ruins, aligned terraces, and ceremonial platforms that suggested the culmination of centuries of design. These glimpses served both as motivation and as confirmation that the path was unfolding correctly. The civilization had orchestrated a narrative through space, combining suspense, reward, and learning to guide participants. By the time the expedition approached the ultimate chamber or revelation point, they had undergone a full curriculum, tested physically, intellectually, ethically, and psychologically. The trials of the hidden path were a transformative process, a deliberate preparation for the civilization's most guarded knowledge. Reflecting on the journey, the explorers realized the scope of what the civilization had achieved. Knowledge, ethics, spirituality, and observation were not scattered or isolated. They were integrated into a coherent system designed to endure. The hidden path was both a safeguard and a teaching tool, ensuring that only those capable of understanding the civilization's methods could reach its deepest truths. By embedding trials into the landscape, artifacts, inscriptions, and celestial alignments, the vanished society had created a dynamic and living educational experience, bridging centuries of time to communicate directly with those prepared to receive it. Ultimately, the trials of the hidden path revealed that the civilization's foresight extended beyond mere preservation. They had anticipated human curiosity, resilience, and the potential for misinterpretation, designing challenges that cultivated the very qualities necessary to grasp their legacy. The explorers emerged not only with discoveries, but with transformed perceptions, enhanced insight, and a profound appreciation for the civilization's intelligence, intentionality, and philosophical depth. The path was more than a route. It was an initiation into a worldview where knowledge, ethics, and experience were inseparable, a journey that bridged time to connect past mastery with present seekers.
After months of painstaking exploration, trials, and deciphering, the expedition finally reached the heart of the hidden civilization, a chamber so meticulously constructed and preserved that it felt like stepping directly into the mind of people who had vanished centuries ago. This was the ultimate revelation, the convergence of all the clues, maps, and artifacts discovered along the journey. Unlike any previous chamber, this space combined technology, philosophy, art, and astronomy in a breathtaking synthesis, leaving the explorers awestruck and acutely aware that they had stumbled upon knowledge deliberately designed to endure beyond time itself. The chamber's architecture was staggering. Massive stone blocks, carved with precision, formed walls and columns that aligned perfectly with the rising sun, casting shadows that illuminated inscriptions only at certain times of day. Ceilings were adorned with celestial diagrams depicting stars, constellations, and planetary movements, intertwined with symbolic motifs representing moral and philosophical principles. The entire space radiated intentionality. Every detail served a purpose, conveying layered information to those who observed carefully and understood the civilization's logic. It was a revelation not just of knowledge, but of vision, planning, and mastery across multiple dimensions of understanding. Artifacts within the chamber further amplified the sense of discovery. Mechanical devices that had baffled the expedition in earlier stages were revealed in context, functioning as intricate tools for astronomical observation, timekeeping, and possibly even energy transfer. Some objects had embedded inscriptions that acted as both operational instructions and philosophical reflections, blending the practical with the abstract in ways that seemed impossible for their era. Scrolls, carefully preserved in niches along the walls, contained mathematical sequences, philosophical treatises, and coded diagrams that hinted at principles of science, ethics, and governance far ahead of their time. The explorers realized that this chamber was not merely a repository. It was a deliberate curriculum, a synthesis of all knowledge the civilization had deemed worthy of preservation. One of the most astonishing elements of the chamber was its integration with celestial events. As the sun rose or set at specific angles, light interacted with devices, inscriptions, and carvings to reveal hidden information, alignments that provided precise dates, astronomical calculations, and encoded guidance for interpreting the maps of hidden realms. The civilization had embedded a living clock into the chamber, combining physics, astronomy, and art in a system that functioned across centuries. For the explorers, this was a revelation of intellect and foresight, a civilization capable of predicting, planning, and preserving knowledge with precision that challenged conventional historical timelines. The inscriptions themselves were profound, layered with multiple meanings. Some appeared to convey mathematical or scientific knowledge, while others presented ethical or philosophical guidance. Sequences of symbols suggested principles of governance, social organization, and interpersonal conduct, reflecting a civilization that understood the interconnection between knowledge, morality, and societal stability. The explorers began to see a pattern. The ultimate revelation was not only a collection of facts or technologies, but a holistic vision of life itself, a civilization attempting to preserve wisdom about the universe, society, and human nature in a form that transcended time. Perhaps the most extraordinary discovery was a central artifact, an intricately carved device resembling a celestial sphere, adorned with inscriptions, symbols, and moving components. Initial studies suggested it was capable of modeling planetary movements, eclipses, and possibly even seasonal cycles with incredible accuracy. Yet the sphere also incorporated philosophical principles, with markings that seemed to encode ethical decisions, moral guidance, or spiritual insights. The civilization had fused empirical observation with ethical reflection, creating a tool that was simultaneously scientific, educational, and moral. For the expedition, it was the ultimate embodiment of the civilization's vision, knowledge, wisdom, and foresight integrated into a single, tangible object. The chamber also revealed the civilization's understanding of human consciousness. Certain inscriptions describe processes of learning, observation, and reflection, emphasizing the development of insight, patience, and discernment as prerequisites for comprehension. The trials along the hidden path, the guardians of knowledge, and the interactive nature of maps and artifacts all converged here, demonstrating that the civilization had deliberately designed a holistic system for cultivating intellect, morality, and perception. The explorers realized that the ultimate revelation was not merely the content of the chamber, but the civilization's methodology, the integration of experience, study, and reflection into a pathway for human development. As they documented and studied the chamber, the expedition began to grasp the civilization's broader philosophy. Knowledge was never isolated. It was always intertwined with ethics, spirituality, and practical application. Science, art, and morality were inseparable, each reinforcing the other. The civilization had created systems to test, protect, and transmit this integrated wisdom, anticipating centuries of loss, decay, and misunderstanding. Every puzzle, device, and alignment was intentional, a testament to foresight and a deep understanding of both the natural and human world. The climactic moment of revelation came when the explorers aligned several devices with the light and celestial positions described in the inscriptions. Shadows fell precisely on inscriptions that had resisted interpretation for months, activating sequences of meaning that tied together maps, sacred sites, and hidden chambers. For the first time, the civilization's knowledge emerged in a coherent, interconnected form, a network of understanding that spanned philosophy, astronomy, technology, ethics, and human consciousness. It was a moment of clarity, a convergence of effort, insight, and patience, proving that the civilization's design had endured exactly as intended. In that instant, the explorers understood the magnitude of their discovery. They were witnessing the culmination of centuries of deliberate preservation, the product of a civilization that had mastered both the physical and intellectual worlds. The ultimate revelation was not merely historical or archaeological. It was existential. The vanished civilization had left a legacy of integrated knowledge, guiding principles, and profound insight, hidden in plain sight, yet encoded with intelligence, foresight, and care. For the expedition, it was a moment of awe, a validation of perseverance, and a reminder that human history contains layers of wisdom far beyond what conventional understanding admits.
With the ultimate revelation behind them, the expedition began to step back and reflect on the enormity of what they had uncovered. The vanished civilization was no longer a shadowy mystery. It had emerged in vivid detail, revealing a culture of extraordinary foresight, intellect, and spiritual sophistication. Yet the more the explorers understood, the more complex the implications became. This was not merely a story of lost cities or forgotten technologies. It was a story of a civilization that had consciously shaped its legacy, anticipating centuries of obscurity, skepticism, and eventual rediscovery. Every ruin, artifact, and inscription was part of a deliberate continuum, designed to transmit knowledge while simultaneously testing the dedication and insight of those who would encounter it. The expedition's reflections quickly turned toward the broader significance of these discoveries. This was a civilization that had integrated science, philosophy, ethics, and spirituality in ways modern society rarely attempts. Technology was not separated from morality. Astronomy was not divorced from philosophy. Practical knowledge was inseparable from the cultivation of wisdom. By embedding these lessons into the very fabric of their world, from sacred sites to hidden chambers, from maps to mechanical devices, they ensured that understanding required active engagement, thoughtfulness, and a readiness to confront challenges. The civilization had created an education system etched into stone, landscape, and sky, designed to endure across generations, even as the people themselves vanished. The explorers could not ignore the contrast between this lost civilization and the modern world. In contemporary society, knowledge is often fragmented, divorced from context, or oversimplified. The vanished civilization, by contrast, demonstrated a holistic approach. Every piece of knowledge was part of an interconnected web, blending practical skills, intellectual insight, and moral guidance. Maps were not only geographic tools, they were philosophical lessons. Sacred sites were not only religious centers, they were interactive classrooms. Hidden chambers were not merely repositories of artifacts. They were immersive curricula testing patience, intellect, and discernment. The civilization's legacy was a reminder that knowledge is most powerful when integrated, preserved thoughtfully, and approached with respect and humility. Artifacts and inscriptions suggested a civilization deeply aware of the fragility of human memory and the inevitability of change. Their designs anticipated decay, misinterpretation, and the passage of time, creating multi-layered systems of encoding knowledge that would survive even if people forgot or misread it. Scrolls were placed in hidden niches, devices were calibrated with celestial events, and inscriptions included redundancies, multiple layers of meaning, and intentional ambiguities to ensure that only diligent and insightful seekers could access the deepest truths. In this way, the civilization had not simply preserved information. It had preserved understanding, encoded in ways that forced active engagement and reflection. The philosophical implications were equally profound. The civilization's texts repeatedly emphasized the relationship between knowledge, ethics, and human flourishing. Scientific observation was intertwined with moral principles. Technological innovation was guided by considerations of societal harmony and sustainability. The explorers began to appreciate a worldview that saw human life as inseparable from the cosmos, where intellect, morality, and practical skill were unified into a single coherent vision. This integration suggested a culture that had achieved a level of sophistication far beyond what history had previously recognized, and whose disappearance may have been deliberate, a conscious choice to leave knowledge behind rather than succumb to conflict or misuse. Reflections on the civilization's disappearance raised more questions than answers. Was it destroyed by natural disaster, human conflict, or a combination of both? Or did it vanish by design, retreating into secrecy to preserve its knowledge from misuse? Clues from the hidden chambers, the guardians, and encoded maps suggested intentionality, that the civilization had engineered its legacy to endure, selectively revealing itself to those prepared to understand. This deliberate approach to preservation underscored the sophistication and foresight of its creators. They had vanished physically, yet their wisdom remained alive, waiting for discovery, interpretation, and appreciation. The expedition also contemplated the responsibilities of modern discovery. Uncovering the civilization's secrets was exhilarating, but it also carried weight. Knowledge, especially knowledge deliberately protected, comes with moral and ethical obligations. The explorers recognized that their findings could reshape history, challenge established narratives, and provoke skepticism or even hostility from academic and political authorities. Sharing these discoveries required careful balance, revealing insights while respecting the civilization's intended methods of transmission and ensuring that wisdom was preserved rather than exploited. The expedition had become not merely observers, but stewards of the civilization's legacy. As they prepared to leave the ruins, the explorers reflected on the transformative effect of the journey itself. Every trial along the hidden path, every encounter with guardians, every alignment, inscription, and artifact had been part of a curriculum designed to develop understanding. They realized that the civilization had not only preserved knowledge, it had shaped the way it should be approached, ensuring that discovery was inseparable from learning, experience, and reflection. The journey had been as important as the discoveries themselves, forging insight, patience, and humility in those who engaged with it fully. Ultimately, the legacy of the vanished civilization was more than a collection of ruins or artifacts. It was a philosophy of preservation, learning, and interconnected wisdom. Their insights into technology, astronomy, ethics, and human perception offer lessons not only for understanding the past, but for shaping the future. The civilization's deliberate encoding of knowledge, integration of disciplines, and preparation for centuries of obscurity stand as a testament to the enduring power of foresight, intellect, and moral responsibility. For the expedition, the journey concluded not with finality, but with a profound sense of reverence, curiosity, and purpose, a reminder that the past continues to speak to those willing to listen, interpret, and act with care. As they departed, the explorers carried with them more than artifacts. They carried a vision of what humanity might aspire to, a blueprint for wisdom that integrates knowledge, morality, and insight. The vanished civilization may have disappeared from the world stage, but its legacy endured, a challenge and an invitation to every generation that follows. To discover it was to participate in a continuum of understanding, a dialogue across centuries, and a testament to the enduring power of curiosity, perseverance, and the human spirit. In the silence of the ruins, the civilization still whispered, reminding the modern world that true knowledge is never lost. It waits for those prepared to seek it with care, courage, and insight.